Remarkable twist, CEO's unexpected challenge to Janitor reveals an incredible secret about love. The break room buzzed with energy as Jake pushed his mop against the gleaming floor, silently wishing he could scrub away the limitations weighing heavily on his shoulders. Every day was a rotation of cleaning and caretaking, a tireless cycle that blurred into the mundane. Yet today felt different. The air crackled with tension, an electric pulse that pulled him into a current beyond his control. Just as he wiped his brow, Samantha, the company's ambitious CEO, entered. Her laughter echoed, instantly commanding attention. "Think you can keep up with me in a math duel, Jake?" She joked, but the challenge ignited a flicker of something deep within him. For a moment, he hesitated, the weight of his past bubbling up, his father's brilliance, squandered in the shadow of daily survival. Math had been their language, a shared passion now buried alongside dreams of a better life. Deep down, he felt the familiar wave of unease wash over him. Could he dare to step into her world, away from the scrubbing of floors, into the depths of equations and theories? "Sure," he said, letting a grin break through. But as playful banter transformed into numbers flying between them like sparks, Jake was struck by contrasting emotions, pride mixed with a profound sense of inadequacy. If she saw his talent, would she care about the years he spent hidden behind a mop? Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. The math problem that seemed trivial at first morphed into a battleground for pride and identity. Jake's mind raced as he recalled the countless nights spent helping Emily with her homework while his own potential languished like an unwanted guest in his own mind. What if he shone in this challenge only to return to the stifling reality of a janitor's closet? Deep-rooted fear gnawed at him. He pictured the skepticism of his colleagues, their whispers sharpening into daggers as he stepped into a light meant for the accomplished. A twinge of desperation flooded his chest as he saw the camaraderie blooming between him and Samantha, an unforeseen connection that threatened to breach the walls he had meticulously built. But what if their worlds were so far apart they couldn't withstand the distance? Would revealing his truth, exposing his late father's secret legacy of genius, distance him from the warmth she offered? As the competition drew to a close, Jake felt torn between his yearning for connection, maybe even more than friendship, and an ever-deepening anguish that came with understanding the cost of ambition. The room fell silent as he stared into her eyes, both pleading and curious. It was a moment of reckoning where possibilities collided, swirling wildly like leaves in a storm. His heart was a clenched fist, both afraid and eager to show his true self. But then another layer of anxiety added pressure. Would embracing this part of him mean sacrificing the simplicity he had fought so hard to maintain for Emily? The walls of the office felt like they were closing in, shadows creeping in to test his resolve. In the storm of emotions, Jake stood silent at the crossroad, sensing the choices before him, each one leading to a different future. Would he stay tethered to the familiar, or let hope lift him into the unknown? Just then, a thought surged through him. What if he could create a new path where he wasn't just the janitor or the son of a failed mathematician? He could be a father, a competitor, a partner, a man. But as doubt loomed larger, he hesitated, fearing the moment they both held their breath, a decision lingering just out of reach, hanging like a dream woven with the threads of ambition and the tightening noose of expectation. As the math duel wound to a close, a silence enveloped the room, every eye trained on Jake, the janitor who had dared to step into the CEO's arena. The equations etched in his mind felt like the ticking of a clock, each second a haunting reminder of the duality he faced: the man who cleaned floors, and the man who could unravel numbers like poetry. He thought he could hear the whispers of his colleagues echoing in his ears, ridiculing his aspirations, but the voice that truly mattered was Samantha's, filled with warmth and challenge. In that pivotal moment, he saw her not merely as a figure of authority but as a beacon of what he wished to become: someone who owned her intelligence, who thrived in a world where ambition and brilliance were celebrated. The realization struck him like a lightning bolt. He had skills buried beneath the layers of grime and doubt. As he looked into her eyes, he felt a flicker of resolve ignite within him. Could he truly shift his narrative? Could he stand tall, not just in her eyes but in his own? The problem was simple enough for a trained mind, yet it transformed into a reflection of Jake's internal struggles. The darker corners of his psyche began to reveal hidden truths. What if he spent years doubting himself when he had the capacity for greatness? Tremors of anticipation coursed through him. He couldn't just return to his routine now. There was no going back, not after this encounter. Jake had always thought of ambition as a forbidden fruit. Would pursuing it mean turning his back on Emily, on their shared moments scraped together in tiny fragments? But a new thought emerged, perhaps sharing this part of himself could open avenues for both of them. What if he could inspire, teach, and ultimately provide more for her than cleaning supplies and meals? The groundwork of their future had always hinged on survival, but what if it could shift to ambition and discovery? With unexpected clarity, he began to see possibilities beyond him. With each equation they solved, Jake felt the shackles of his old identity loosening. Samantha's laughter danced around him, coaxing a lightness he hadn't experienced in years. As she congratulated him on a particularly challenging problem, he reveled in her approval, a feeling he realized he had long denied himself. The math challenges soon shifted into conversations, her questions prompting him to think beyond the numbers, yet, as they flourished in this newfound camaraderie, fear lurked at the edges of his joy. Desires for intellectual exchanges felt both exhilarating and terrifying. He questioned whether Samantha would still see him as an equal if she uncovered the full extent of his past, the shame, the routine that had solidified his identity as just a janitor. Would she still want him within her world of success? That fear clawed at him, pulling him back into hesitation. Even with the spark of ambition lighting the path ahead, the unsettling doubt about his worth lingered. This tug-of-war within him made him realize he had a choice, to step forward and risk it all or retreat into the shadows he knew too well. As the day came to an end, Jake once again grabbed his mop, yet now it felt different, more like a tool of transition than one of servitude. Dust motes danced in the light filtering through the break room as he pondered the next steps. His heart raced, a tumult of excitement and fear threading through his veins. He thought of the math, of the moments shared with Samantha, a flicker of connection igniting a desire to explore both the professional and personal realms. What if he boldly approached her with his story? What if he told her of his father's legacy, about the equations that had once danced through the joyous gatherings of their home? For a moment, he was ready to ascend from the shadows. A plan formed, a tangible connection between math and a life renewed. But just as he began to gather his thoughts, the door swung open again, and reality crashed down. Their manager entered, oblivious to the tension and energy that had just taken place. Jake's next step lingered like a question mark in the air, and as their eyes met across the room, an understanding sparked between them. He realized that this wasn't merely about proving his worth, it was about claiming his identity. The time had come to face not just his fears, but the very essence of who he was meant to be. What would he say when the door closed behind the manager? Would he reveal his hidden calculations, or would the hesitation pull him back into his old role? Jake understood that bravery wasn't just about ambition, it was about embracing his truth. All eyes would soon be on him once more, it was now or never. As the manager moved through the break room, Jake's thoughts whirled like a storm. He clenched his mop tightly, fingers gripping the handle, grounding him amidst the maelstrom of emotions. His gaze flickered back to Samantha. She held a tentative yet encouraging smile, her eyes mirroring the challenge he posed for himself. Could he really present the full picture of himself? The prospect was both exhilarating and terrifying, the manager's voice, droning on about quarterly reports, barely registered. Jake's focus honed in on the space between him and Samantha, a world filled with unspoken words and the potential for transformation. He scanned the room, ensuring others remained distracted. This moment felt monumental, hanging in the air like a suspended breath. The realization slowly dawned on him: if he revealed his heart, it wouldn't just be a confession to Samantha, it would be a declaration to himself. Once the manager exited the room, Jake felt a surge of urgency. No more postponements. He dropped the mop and turned towards Samantha, who raised an eyebrow, intrigued by his sudden boldness. His heart raced, electricity coursing through him as he approached her. "I need to share something," he began, every syllable bordering on a confession. My past isn't just cleaning floors. It's filled with equations, dreams, and a legacy that weighs heavily on me. Samantha's eyes widened, searching his face for clarity. Jake grappled for the right words, feeling the pressure of vulnerability envelop him. My dad was a brilliant mathematician. He used to teach me at the kitchen table how numbers aren't just numbers. They tell stories. Jake felt his defenses falter, the rawness of his admission blooming a sense of freedom he hadn't anticipated. After he died, I felt lost. I let fear of failure trap me in this job. But after the math duel, being here with you, something changed. I understand now it's time for me to embrace that part of myself again. Samantha leaned in, her surprise transforming into an understanding warmth. You've hidden your talent, but it doesn't define you alone. Your willingness to share this, Jake, is part of who you are, too. Her words unfurled something profound within him, an affirmation that melded the fear of judgment and the necessity of acceptance. He had spent so long believing that revealing such vulnerability would cost him everything, but now he felt like a phoenix rising, reborn from his ashes. But beneath Parker's warmth, tendrils of apprehension still clung tight to him. What if this connection, this truth he had shared, turned into something that made their professional dynamic awkward? Would she still want to collaborate with him as an equal if she realized he was still very much a novice in the corporate world? The wave of enthusiasm began to wane, threading hesitations back into his consciousness. Jake's heart sank as he wrestled with a familiar enemy, self-doubt. He stood at a precipice, balancing on the fine line between ambition and an unsettling fear of exposure. What happens now? He asked, his voice wavering slightly. Will this change things between us? Samantha's expression softened, and she took a step closer, creating a bubble of intimacy around them. It might change everything for the better. You've just shown me your depth. The potency of her words sent electric shocks through him. This was more than a conversation. It marked the opening chapter of a new journey. It would require more than just revealing his past aspirations. He had to act upon them. As he pondered the implications of their discussion, Samantha glanced at the clock. The day's hours were slipping away, and with it, the fleeting moment of bravery felt almost lost. We should get back to work, she suggested, her voice steady yet infused with a hint of urgency. Jake nodded, grappling with the weight of anticipation as he considered how he would navigate this new chapter. Empowered by his small act of courage, the flame inside him roared anew, lighting a path layered with unknown potential. He realized that each choice he made from here on out would echo in the lives of others, including Emily. What if he invited her to explore this side of himself? Would that bridge their world of survival into one where dreams could flourish? The challenge ahead loomed larger, but Jake felt more ready to face it than ever before. In the wake of all that had been displaced, he resolved to redefine his identity. All he needed was one more step. With the door closing behind them as they entered the main office space, Jake suddenly felt an urge to act. What if he pressed pause on their returning to routine? What if he asked Samantha to be his mentor, to journey alongside him as he ventured into the unknown terrain of his aspirations? It was time to risk this connection, not just with her but with himself. But would he find the courage to utter those words, or would hesitation once again cloud his path? Would Samantha become the guide in his exploration of talent, or would doubt guide him back into silence? The buzz of office chatter swirled around Jake as he settled back into his usual work routine, but his mind was far from the mundane tasks at hand. He absent-mindedly wiped down a counter, the motions robotic as thoughts of his conversation with Samantha spiraled through his head. He felt electric, transformed yet held back by tendrils of doubt that curled around his determination, while the fluorescent lights flickered overhead, illuminating the busy workspace. Jake's eyes drifted across the room to where Samantha immersed herself in a project at her desk. He'd come so far with his newfound courage, but taking that next leap felt as daunting as a playlist of unsolved equations. He had gripped the edge of vulnerability, and now it was time to embrace it fully. The prospect of mentorship loomed large. The idea tugged at him, pulling him into a dance between ambition and fear. Would Samantha truly want to take on the additional burden of guiding someone who was still so lost in the corporate maze? A gnawing fear crept in. What if she saw more of his imperfections and less of his potential? Jake shook his head, trying to banish the negative thoughts spiraling out of control. After a few moments of dragging his feet, he could no longer ignore the urgency building within him. Hesitation would only drive them further apart. The flicker of excitement she had ignited in him began to dull. He needed to act, to step out of the shadows he had cast upon himself. Taking a deep breath, he approached her desk, each footfall echoing in his ears. "Samantha?" he called, voice barely above the hum of office activity. She looked up, surprise etching her features, as if she sensed something shifting in the air around them. "Hey, Jake. Everything okay?" He wavered for just a beat, caught between self-doubt and conviction. "I wanted to ask if you would consider mentoring me. Help me find my footing in this whole corporate thing." Samantha leaned back in her chair, surprise flashing in her eyes before morphing into a warm smile. "Jake, I'd love to. I think it's great you want to explore more than just what's in front of you." Her words swelled like a buoy anchoring him amidst the waves of uncertainty. Could this truly mark the start of not just greater professional success but personal growth too? The exhilaration was intoxicating, yet a shadow lingered, a nagging whisper of inadequacy. Was there still a space in her life for someone like him, a janitor longing to rise, even if it meant confronting a past that felt buried deep? "Great. I can really use the perspective," he responded, trying to sound optimistic. He was aware of the precise moment the conversation turned from theoretical to actual, embedding a promise of change into the fabric of his daily routine. "Let us schedule our first session," Samantha said, typing notes in her planner. As she spoke, Jake found himself captivated by her enthusiasm and support. For the first time, he noticed not only her professional veneer but also the raw tenacity that glimmered through. Was he not the only one yearning for growth? Could their paths align in a way that benefited them both? As he left Samantha's desk, the weight on his shoulders felt different, lighter. Yet, the gravity of his decision crept alongside him. This wasn't just about learning corporate strategies or climbing a ladder. No, this was about him digging into the mathematical legacy his father left behind, uncovering the potential he had buried under layers of regret and fear. Each step he took toward embracing his aspirations also unearthed the shadows of self-reproach. He would have to confront the part of him that felt unworthy of this opportunity. Could he really keep reaching for the stars while his feet were still mired in self-doubt? Jake returned to his tasks with renewed vigor, but an undeniable tension nestled in his gut. Today felt like the start of something monumental, but in what ways would the struggle for acceptance and belonging unfold? As the clock ticked down on the workday, Jake sensed an urgency building within him, as if destiny was approaching with a purpose. Would he grasp this moment, or let the uncertainty wash over him once more? Suddenly, a sharp voice called out from behind him, slicing through his thoughts with an edge of challenge. "Hey, Jake. You're really trying to climb the corporate ladder, huh? Don't forget where you belong." The voice belonged to Mark, a coworker known for his biting remarks, a direct confrontation that Jason had not seen coming. Yet, as he stood there, faced with his antagonist, something inside him stirred. Would he shy away from the negativity, or would this become the test of his newfound belief in himself? The crossroads lay ahead, and each choice would ripple through the journey he had just committed to. Would he falter or stand firm against Mark's taunts? Would this be his moment to fight for his place, or would fear lead him astray, back into silence? The intensity of Mark's words hung in the air, thick and palpable, charging the space around Jake. He felt the familiar sting of insecurity clawing at him, but this time, he stayed rooted in place. The confrontation had thrown down a gauntlet, forcing him to confront not only Mark but the self-image he had clung to for so long. "Where I belong? I'm not sure I believe that anymore," Jake replied, surprising even himself. The words came out steadier than he had anticipated. The rawness in his tone was softened by an unveiled layer of determination. Jake could practically feel Samantha's mentorship hovering in the background, urging him on, nudging him toward honesty. Mark raised an eyebrow but snickered, the contempt lacing his voice. "Yeah? You think just because you're getting a little mentoring, you can waltz into a different world? You're a janitor, that's where you fit best." The laughter of nearby colleagues echoed, a mockery that cut into Jake's defenses. A small voice whispered in his mind, telling him to play it safe, to retreat into the background. But he had come too far to let that happen. Each ridicule felt like a challenge to dispel, a demon to confront and banish. "Maybe you're right, Mark," Jake said, his voice steadying with every word. "Maybe it's time to redefine what belonging means for me." A ripple of surprise coursed through the small group that had gathered, but Mark merely scoffed. Still, Jake sensed the tremor in Mark's confidence. "Keep dreaming, champ," was all Mark managed to retort, but the depth of Jake's anchor had shifted. Taking a deep breath, Jake retreated to his work, but the encounter had ignited something urgent and alive within him. He felt emboldened, the quarreling voices within him began to quiet. What had started as a challenge to his existence turned into a renewed realization he could chart a path that was distinctly his own. It was no longer about keeping his head down and surviving, it was about thriving. The subsequent days blended into Hawkins' routine, but the air was different. Mentorship meetings with Samantha became a recurring highlight. They discussed corporate strategies, analyzed plans, and dissected the mechanics of business savvy. Each session unveiled not just professional insights, but parts of Jake he hadn't realized were there, an analytical mind wrapped in layers of emotion and awareness. One afternoon, after a feedback session where he had showcased an original idea, a plan for increasing efficiency in the supply chain, Samantha grinned. "Jake, you should present this to the team. Strong ideas come from strong minds." Her praise was a warm glow against the frost of doubt, but even as she said those words, the creeping doubts lingered. Would the team take him seriously? Or would they dismiss him as just the janitor? "Maybe I will," he said, barely concealing the tremor in his voice. She arched an eyebrow. "You're hesitating. What's stopping you?" Jake felt an internal battle brewing. What if my idea fails? What if they laugh? Or what if it succeeds? She leaned in. "You owe it to yourself to find out. There's power in presenting your vision, regardless of where you started." That was the reality he hadn't considered, an avenue paved with potential rather than pitfalls. The tension coiled in his gut twisted into something more manageable, a mixture of excitement and fear. Could he truly be someone who presented to the very people he had been scared of? The weight of the decision pressed heavily against him. His hand brushed over the notes of his proposal, and as he weighed the implications, a flicker of determination ignited beneath his skin. That moment at the brink rerouted his thoughts from self-doubt to self-belief. As the week pressed on, every new obstacle felt manageable. Jake began crafting his presentation. Late nights filled with diagrams and bullet points turned into moments of self-discovery, a merger of his outdated beliefs with newfound aspirations. Yet, in the quiet moments, the specter of Mark's words loomed. He would have to confront that lingering shadow once more. The day approached, the moment of truth on the horizon. Could he stand in front of his colleagues, those who'd only seen him as the janitor, and claim his space as an innovator? When the day arrived, Jake stood outside the conference room. The buzz of conversation wafted through the door, and he took a deep breath, feeling the echoes of both dread and anticipation swirling within him. This was not just a presentation, it was an unveiling, a declaration of his true self. Would he walk in and embrace this opportunity, or would he let fear snatch away yet another chance for transformation? All he knew was that he was at the threshold of decision. The moment of truth waited impatiently ahead. Jake stood poised outside the conference room, each tick of the clock echoing like a relentless drumbeat in his chest. The cacophony inside surged, a mix of mingling voices, paper shuffling, and the faint clinks of coffee cups, offering a stark reminder of the gravity of the moment. This was the line drawn in the sand. One step forward meant confronting not just his colleagues but the entire perception they held of him. That he took a deep breath, allowing the air to fill his lungs and steady his trembling hands. Remember Samantha's words, he thought. They echoed like a chant. With newfound resolve, Jake gripped the doorknob, exerting just enough pressure to turn it slowly. The door creaked open, revealing a sea of faces momentarily frozen in surprise. That he stepped in and felt the weight of their gazes pin him against the wall. A mix of disbelief and curiosity swirled around the room, as if they were collectively recalibrating their understanding of him. Pushing through the suffocating tension, he moved to the center, poised but visibly taut. As he stood at the front of the room, Jake's mind swirled with all the possible outcomes. Defeat or triumph danced tantalizingly close. "Thank you, everyone, for allowing me to share my thoughts today," he said, his voice steady despite the fire in his chest that he could see Mark sitting at the back, arms folded tightly, a smirk etched across his face. The recognition of that unfurling contempt sparked a surge of adrenaline within him. He often transformed fear into fuel, and now was no different. Taking a small step forward, he unfolded the first page of his carefully crafted presentation. They listened intently as he shared his ideas on increasing supply chain efficiency. With every point he delivered, Jake felt a burgeoning sense of command filling the space. Colleagues who had once seen him as an invisible fixture in the office no longer seemed to overlook him. Hands went up to ask questions, and rather than being dismissed, he engaged with confidence, feeling the energy of curiosity peppering the air. Yet, as Jake spoke, doubt crept in like an unwelcome specter. Would they see beyond the janitor label he had been given? He noticed the flickers of skepticism in their expressions, and it gnawed at him momentarily, a dark reminder of Mark's laughter. The presentation flowed, maintaining traction with the data backing his claims and the passion filling his voice. But in the recesses of his mind, he battled with an even deeper conflict. What if they believed him? What if, in this moment of vulnerability, he became what he never thought possible? When he reached the conclusion, he paused, scanning the room. In conclusion, we have the opportunity to not only improve efficiency but to redefine our approach to challenges we face. Sometimes the most profound insights come from the most unexpected sources. The room fell silent, a stark contrast to the shuffle of noise that had greeted his entrance. Their eyes were focused sharply, and for the first time, he could discern a shift in their regard. It wasn't just respect, it felt like a recognition of his worth. Mark cleared his throat, interrupting the poignant silence. "You can't be serious, Jake. All of this from the janitor?" His tone dripped with contempt, but it was met with an unexpected gentleness from others in the room. Jake's heart raced again, but this time, it was from the rush of adrenaline in his veins. "What's serious is acknowledging that solutions can come from anyone, regardless of their title," he replied, his voice infused with the strength he had cultivated over the past few months. In that exchange, Jake grasped something profound. The hesitations he had faced were now shifting, bending, and when he looked at his colleagues, they weren't just seeing a janitor but a potential collaborator, a creator of insight. Yet, in the midst of the rising energy, Jake also felt a subtle undercurrent. Members of the team were engaged, but there were still skeptics. How could he ensure their respect wasn't merely fleeting? As he stepped down, hearts pumping and minds racing, he felt a lingering sense of uncertainty. So much had changed in just that room, but would it sustain once the doors closed? What if his journey had only just begun? What if Mark wasn't just his antagonist outside, but something deeper was buried within as well? The response to his presentation was imminent, and despite the flickers of victory, shadows of doubt lingered at the edges of his mind, hinting at challenges yet to come. The conference room buzzed a minute longer after Jake concluded, a symphony of whispered exchanges and sidelong glances. He stepped down, pulse quickening, replaying the cascading moments of his speech in his mind. The shift in the atmosphere felt tangible, but uncertainty was a ruthless companion, lurking in the corners of his thoughts. As he made his way to the door, he caught snippets of conversation. Luke, one of the quieter analysts, spoke up. "I think there's merit in what Jake said." The words landed softly, but their weight was undeniable. He turned instinctively towards the voice, and for the first time, Luke was looking at him, genuinely interested. A flicker of hope ignited within Jake, but it was immediately quashed by the looming presence of Mark, who sauntered over, arms crossed. "Great job," Mark sneered, sarcasm dripping like honey from each syllable. "But let's be real, can you back this up? Or were you just speaking from your experience as a janitor?" The challenge felt personal, like barbs aimed directly at his core. Jake clenched his jaw. What Mark said was a cruel reminder of the label he was trying to shed. "What I shared comes from a place of insight, not title. Anyone can contribute if given the chance," he stated, his voice steady yet edged with a raw intensity. The eyes of others began shifting their focus from Mark to Jake, a subtle acknowledgement of the tension brewing. Jake felt his words pump oxygen into an escalating fire. "Keep dreaming," Mark scoffed, but Jake noticed a flicker of uncertainty in Mark's eyes. Perhaps this was about more than just job titles. maybe it was about his own insecurities showing through the facade. As the meeting dissolved into casual chatter, Jake felt a glimmer of purpose kindle within him. This was a call to arms not just for him but for anyone whose voice had been muted. He headed to his desk, heart thumping as he began jotting down ideas, his thoughts spiraling into a plan. He envisioned a series of workshops where insights from all levels of the company could be shared openly, a platform where ideas mattered more than status. The clock ticked on the wall, its relentless rhythm pushing Jake forward, and suddenly he realized the stakes had risen. He wasn't just defending his truth anymore. He was poised to create a pathway for others too. Days turned into a week, and the buzz from the presentation lingered. Colleagues approached Jake cautiously, their conversations punctuated with hesitations, as if they were tiptoeing around the new dynamic between them. However, there were still murmurs, sometimes supportive, but other times reminiscent of Mark's lingering scorn. "Are you really going to follow through with this?" A voice rang out, cutting through Jake's concentration. It was Sarah, one of the team leaders whose opinion he respected. "I am. I know it seems ambitious, but sharing ideas can transform our workplace. We need to innovate, and that requires input from everyone, not just the usual players," he replied, fueled by newfound determination. "There are risks, Jake. What if it fails? What if no one shows up?" Her gaze was searching, probing for weakness, a test of his conviction. "Or what if it succeeds? What if we harness untapped potential that redefines our approach?" He countered, feeling emboldened as he navigated the path of leadership even further, every word steeped with belief. The weeks ahead grew increasingly demanding. Jake found himself alternating between moments of validation as colleagues began to open up and the crushing weight of doubt that sometimes threatened to overwhelm. He continued drafting proposals, seeking feedback, and reaching out to others who shared his vision. But shadowing his progress was Mark, re-emerging with snide remarks and veiled challenges. "Let us hope you're not setting yourself up for disappointment, Janitor," he taunted from across the room, laughter spilling from his mouth. Yet with each barb, Jake felt fortified rather than diminished. Every sneer became a reminder of his resolve, a chance to confront not just Mark's dismissive attitude but the deeper insecurities that both men bore in varying measures. As Jake finally stood ready to present his workshop plan to management, he felt an unfamiliar strength. But just then, a message flickered across his phone from Samantha. "Don't forget what you really want to accomplish." What was it he was truly after? Recognition? Transformation? Or something deeper? That question struck Jake in a way that twisted his stomach. He had spent so long accepting the narrative of his life as simply a janitor. But perhaps he was meant to forge a new path not just for himself, but for everyone who felt invisible. Little did he know, as these dreams took shape, a challenge lurked at the other end. The vibrant tapestry of change could also unravel just as quickly, especially with Mark watching intently, ready to pounce the moment he sensed a falter. The moment of confrontation seemed inevitable. Jake could feel it in his bones. The time had come to face Mark once and for all, ready to roar against the shadows that sought to snuff out his light. The days leading to the management meeting blurred into an intricate dance of anticipation and anxiety, each moment stretching time thin. Jake found himself rehearsing in front of the bathroom mirror, his reflection staring back as if expecting more. Every angle of his face told a story, one mixed with fear and determination, a struggle between who he was and who he wanted to become. "Remember your audience," he muttered to himself, echoing back Sarah's advice that had initially felt like a distant echo. The words swirled in his mind, growing ever more significant as he faced the impending challenge. This wasn't solely about his workshop. It was a declaration of his newfound self-worth, an assertion of value that transcended titles. On the day of the meeting, Jake felt a palpable charge in the air, an electricity that buzzed through the walls of the boardroom. He arrived early, strategically positioning himself at the front table, allowing the weight of his aspirations to settle on his shoulders. The tension was thick enough to slice through, companions to the silent judgments forming behind polished desks. As management trickled in, Jake's focus shifted. He spotted Mark, who entered with his characteristic swagger, a predatory glint in his eye. Mark extended a leisurely smile as he approached, one that danced dangerously close to mockery. "You ready to get schooled again, Janitor?" His voice was low, cutting through the murmurs around them. Jake remained still, inhaling sharply as he forced his heart rate to steady. "I'm ready to bring change," he replied simply, gauging the slight frown that crossed Mark's face. For once, the uncertainty that usually plagued him began to slip away. Confidence surged in him like a tide, pushing back against Mark's cruelty. When the time came for him to speak, Jake rose to his feet, his palms slightly damp but steady. He surveyed the room, taking in the faces of those in positions of authority, poised to judge him. "Thank you for the time to share this initiative," he began, voice slicing through the chatter. He could sense Mark's eyes boring into him, waiting for the falter that never came. "I believe that everyone in this room possesses insights that could innovate our practices," he asserted, building momentum. "The goal of my workshops is to create a platform where every voice can matter, where our hierarchy transforms into collaboration for collective genius." As he spoke, Jake felt the stares shifting, some intrigued, others skeptical. Sarah nodded in support, her presence anchoring the surge of his emotions. Each word was fueled by the fire of his experiences, a manifestation of everything he had fought against, not just for himself, but for every underappreciated employee. Mark's hand shot up halfway through. "And what makes you think they care about your teachings? Have you ever led anything before?" His snide question sliced through the atmosphere, but Jake straightened, embracing the challenge. "I care about their contributions," he answered. "I've been in their shoes. A title does not define capability, it stifles it." With that statement, Jake could feel the stifled energy crackle again. Venturing into unknown territory, he laid bare the essence of why he was there, because he believed in the power of collective growth. The murmurs began again, and Jake leaned in, eyes bright with conviction. "What we stand to gain is transformative. All ideas are valid, and together, we can identify innovative solutions to long-standing challenges." Jake exhaled once he concluded, the air heavy with anticipation. Silence wrapped around the room, waiting for a response from management, especially from the imposing figure of the CEO, who leaned forward, clearly intrigued. Yet just as relief washed over him, Mark broke the stillness. "Interesting sentiment, but let us entertain a reality check here. Are you prepared for the fallout if this workshop fails?" Jake felt the weight of Mark's challenge, how easily he could retreat, cloaked in doubt, but instead, a steady warmth gripped him, propelling courage into his voice. "What if it succeeds? The consequences of fear shouldn't dictate our choices." Mark's smile faltered. The moment felt frozen, the potential for conflict palpable, but Jake sensed that something had shifted. Perhaps this confrontation was about more than business, it was about dismantling the fears they both wielded. With a resolve crystallized in this exchange, Jake realized he was no longer fighting just to prove his worth. He was engaging in a dialogue that might even challenge Mark's carefully curated image. But even as triumph flickered in his chest, doubt lingered, whispering intentions yet unvoiced, an indication of even greater challenges slumbering in the shadows. As the CEO leaned in to address the tension between Jake and Mark, a chilling question hovered in the air, waiting to be unspooled. With his heart pounding and possibilities swirling around him, Jake braced for the response that would either cement his role or unravel the fragile progress he had made. What if this encounter was only the beginning of a greater trial, one that would demand every ounce of strength he had discovered within? Jake's heart pounded in his chest as he locked eyes with the CEO, a figure of authority whose expression signaled the fate of his ambitions. The stillness in the room amplified the weight of the moment, each second stretching into eternity. Would the CEO side with Mark's skepticism or support Jake's vision? "We've heard some intriguing insights today," the CEO began, his voice calm yet authoritative, each word chosen with painstaking care. "But let us get real. Change requires not just vision but also accountability." "Jake," he paused, letting the weight of his gaze linger, "how will you handle resistance, not only from management but from peers who doubt your leadership?" The question hung in the air, and Jake's mind raced. The walls of the boardroom felt like they were closing and the pressure was suffocating. In the past, resistance would have crushed him, forcing him back into his shell. But today, he could no longer afford to yield to fear. "I understand that resistance is natural," Jake replied, forcing clarity into his voice. "And I plan to address it by fostering a culture of openness. Instead of fighting against skepticism, I need those voices, the pushback, to fine-tune the initiative." Rather than seeing them as opponents, I see them as crucial partners in our transformation. Jake's words seemed to cut through the tension, but Mark scoffed, still lurking in the shadows of doubt. And if that culture of openness backfires? What if the workshop does fail, or worse, fractures the team? A tense silence enveloped the room as Mark's challenge sparked a familiar insecurity in Jake. The voices of past critics echoed in his mind, whispering about his past failures. He could feel the familiar grip of self-doubt closing around him, but then Jake remembered the connection he had made with his team, the struggles he had overcome. What if it succeeds? He countered, eyebrows knit with determination. We can learn from our failures as much as our triumphs. My experience on the job taught me that every setback is a lesson. I don't want to just lead, I want to create an environment where failings enrich our collaboration instead of hindering it. The CEO leaned back, considering Jake's response. The murmurs throughout the room shifted slightly, gaining a note of respect, a tremor of faith from his peers who previously held their opinions close to their chests. The walls felt less imposing, the atmosphere charged with a flicker of possibility. Insightful, the CEO finally responded. However, let us push further. If you truly wish to innovate our practices together, what actionable steps will you take to demonstrate your commitment? Jake's mind pivoted, recalling the workshops he envisioned: small, focus groups fostering dialogue. He felt the ideas crystallizing, forming into concrete proposals. The anticipation surged again, propelling him forward. I'll implement regular feedback loops within the workshops, inviting participants to shape the agenda actively. This won't just be my effort, it will be a team-led initiative. We can rotate leadership roles during sessions, allowing everyone a voice and ownership over their contributions. In this moment, Jake wasn't merely performing for the audience, he was embodying the change he sought. The thrill of new potential mingled with fear: what if his strategies fell short? Yet a pittance of doubt was overshadowed by newfound resolve. He had crossed a threshold. No longer just the janitor fighting for respect, he was now a leader crafting a vision towards shared success. Staring back at the CEO, Jake found not only determination but a sense of responsibility growing inside him. The stakes were higher now, and the outcome, a failed initiative or a thriving dialogue, loomed before him, each option fraught with consequences. Mark's expression shifted subtly, irritation mingling with disbelief. With these new proposals hanging in the air, Jake couldn't shake the profound sense that this confrontation with Mark was merely the tip of the iceberg. Every challenge he faced would demand he dig deeper into himself, revealing layers of untapped resilience he hadn't known existed. As the tension simmered in the air, the CEO prepared to weigh Jake's proposals with the management team. Would they rally behind him, or would Mark's skepticism drown out the tides of change? Jake could only brace himself for the answer, a pivotal moment teetering on the edge of personal and professional rebirth. The way forward was uncertain, but one thing was clear: change was coming, and the true test had only just begun. Would he seize the opportunities ahead or crumble under pressure? The answer loomed, at the cusp of fate, leaving Jake more anxious than ever. In the wake of the intense meeting, Jake could feel the transformation he had long sought settle deep within him, like a sturdy foundation for a new life. The whispers he had so carefully navigated transformed into a harmonic resonance of acceptance and support. Each step he took through the office felt lighter. He was no longer just the janitor but a budding leader with a vision. Every day, the workshops he initiated gained traction, and employees from all levels began voicing ideas that resonated with a purpose. His colleagues who once viewed him through skeptical lenses were now actively engaging in the dialogue, contributing insights that propelled the company towards innovative solutions. Jake's eyes gleamed not just from the success of his project, but from realizing the power of collective intelligence. Through determined efforts, he found his rhythm, leading discussions, facilitating brainstorming sessions, and celebrating every victory, no matter how small. Each encounter with Mark transformed from a confrontation into an opportunity for Jake to showcase his resilience. When Mark sneered, "Who do you think you are?" Jake simply smiled, meeting the challenge with grace, responding, "Just someone trying to drive positive change." Empowered, he discovered newfound confidence that shielded him from Mark's jabs. One afternoon, as Jake wrapped up a particularly fruitful workshop, his phone chimed. It was a message from Samantha, the board has seen the progress you're making. They're excited. This is your moment. The exhilaration of being recognized for his efforts brought a rush of light to Jake's chest. What had begun as an act of defiance turned into a clear path forward, and he felt validated, more than ever, in his identity not just as an employee, but as a contributor of value. Later that week, while presenting the results of the workshops to the executive team, Jake stood tall, aware that his colleagues were gathered not just to listen, but to hear him. Presenting confidently, he shared the challenges they had scrutinized and the powerful solutions born from collaboration. Numbers he had once crumpled under suddenly propelled him into new realms of respect. The feedback sessions had surfaced ideas that not only streamlined processes but also fostered a community where voices were valued, regardless of title. Once he finished, the applause resonated warmly around the room. The CEO stood to speak, casting an approving glance at Jake. You've shown us that innovation is possible when everyone feels they belong. Jake, we'd like you to take on a permanent role leading employee engagement initiatives moving forward. The weight of his aspirations materialized into tangible accomplishments, and for the first time, he felt properly recognized. Walking out of the meeting, Jake was struck by a wave of realization. Each small step he took had transformed into significant strides toward the future he once thought unreachable. He wasn't just a janitor, he was now an instrumental player in shaping his company's success narrative. In a moment of reflection, he found himself back in the break room where it all began. He thought back to the days of pushing a mop, burdened by fear and hidden potential. Looking out the window, he saw Samantha approach with a smile that ignited the kind of confidence that only comes from having conquered doubts. They had cultivated a friendship grounded in ambition and mutual respect. Jake, she said softly, I knew you had this in you. We're proud of you, and I'm excited to see where this journey takes you. With a warm smile bridging their shared experiences, Jake realized he had turned a page. Not only had he embraced his father's legacy of intelligence, but he had also woven new life into his own narrative, one where ambition thrived, and dreams were finally within reach. His journey was still ongoing, but Jake now stepped forward with clarity and purpose. Each choice was guided by the lessons learned, fueled by newfound ambition, and bursting with a promise of never looking back. He had transcended his limitations, not merely becoming a figure within the company but establishing himself as an agent of change. Though still holding ambition at arm's length, Jake's journey served as a reminder. It was no longer simply about cleaning floors but about unearthing potential, embracing vulnerabilities, and wielding them into avenues of strength. And for those inspired by his story, it was time to act. You need to subscribe now to ensure you don't miss the next exclusive emotional stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm and show your appreciation. Comment your reactions and theories about the ending, join a heartening dialogue. Share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. Every individual story matters. This is the moment to show your support and embrace the journey of transformation. Don't wait even one more second to share.